Call this meeting to order. George, take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Here.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here. Stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we talk about our district goals. We have 3 goals: student achievement, financial prudence, community engagement. Every decision we make at this board meeting reflects those 3 goals. With that, I'm going to move on to recognition.
We have no recognition tonight.
All right. Superintendent's report.
Just a couple of things, and if you can bear with me, just a couple thank yous. You know, tomorrow we welcome everybody back for convocation to kick off the 1920 school year, and on Monday we welcome all of our staff back and our students. And you know, I hope everybody's had a wonderful summer break. And during that summer break, we've had a ton of employees working to make sure that we're ready to go. So just a couple shout outs for the great work that our folks do over the summertime. First of all, our maintenance department. Our maintenance department does a phenomenal job. If you've been around our district, you see some of the improvements they've done, whether it's sidewalks at the preschool, some work at Whitney Playground, the Moraski Playground internally. They not only save the district thousands of dollars, but they do high quality work. As the board knows, with phase 1 reductions, we changed the work schedule of our building secretaries and some of our office staff members. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate our office staff and secretaries for being open to that change, working through that change, and developing new processes and procedures to make sure we're still ready to go for the first day of school. And if you go around our buildings, our custodial staff has just done a phenomenal job getting the buildings ready to go. Our tech assistants and our tech department getting all the computers ready to run for the first day of school, getting new stuff installed, and the list goes on. You know, one of the things that we changed, and it's the first time it's going to be put into place this year, is we changed how we award routes for our bus drivers. So that's a whole new procedure. It used to be we would bid for routes in October. That meant students had one bus driver for the first few months of the school year, and then they got possibly a new bus driver. We changed that all around this year, and the drivers bid a few days ago. So working through those changes, and now students that have their bus driver, they're going to have their bus driver for the entire school year, which we think is an enhancement. You know, I just want to say thank you to Aaron's department. One of the things that we started a few years ago was a kindergarten screening process. So pretty much most of last week and this week, we had a huge kindergarten class that we have this year coming through, getting screened, getting prepared for the first day of school, and Jenny's department. We had more hires than we thought we were going to have, and we hired a few people this week, one today that we'll meet in a little bit, and we're going to be ready for the first day of school. And then I also want to thank our parents. We're blessed to work and have our careers in a phenomenal district, a phenomenal community. We're seeing more. It's caused some challenges for us, but we've seen more enrollment in our school district in the last 2 weeks than we've seen in a long time. That's caused us challenges because class sizes and staffing has kind of been set, and they keep coming and keep registering, but we're working through it. So we want to just thank our parents for their patience, as well as our parents that are choosing Strongsville to educate their children and call Strongsville home. So I'm thrilled to get going with the school year tomorrow, and just want to thank so many of our staff, including our administrators and teachers who've worked, our administrators throughout the summer getting ready, and our teachers that are back at it in the classrooms, making sure that everything's good to go for the start of the school year. So that concludes my report.
Excellent. I think the positive enrollment is a good indicator of what a fine job we're doing and how well things are going. And I'm excited about that. I'm also excited because I remember during the levy time when we had a couple of people come up here and tell us that our numbers weren't accurate because enrollment's going to fall off we continue to drop, and we're seeing the exact opposite. So we knew through good work we would draw the students in.
Well, it's interesting, Mr. Naso. I was talking to a new resident today, and we were talking about enrollment and getting his kids into the school district. And I can't tell you how many new parents I've talked to that said that they were waiting to see what happened with the levy. And now that the district's in a strong financial position moving forward, they were able to purchase a new home in Strongsville, sell their old home. So I think a part of that turnover and a part of new families coming in is they do see the strong financial future of the district, and we're excited to have them a part of our community.
Mr. Naso, I had the opportunity, just by chance, to come up when the kindergarten screening was going on in here the other day. And I know there were several volunteers that were helping with that, and the psychologists were all doing their job, but I gotta tell you, it was one of the best looking, smartest bunch of mini Mustangs that I've seen in a long time, and there was a lot of them.
There was.
Which was a good thing, so we're looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Cameron,
Yes, sir.
do you have a net number?
No, I can get that for you, Mr. Rico.
Ballpark.
I don't have any, I mean, anybody have an idea for addition? I mean, I would say we're probably at least 30 plus.
Well, that's a great number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, if you can report that
Yeah, I
back
will.
to the board.
Yep, that'd be cool. All right, public comment, I see we have none. That brings us to approval of minutes. We have the June 6th, June 27th, and June 15th minutes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? I assume we've all read them. George, take roll.
Colonel
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I have a few items for your consideration tonight. The first is item A, the financial report for the month ending June 30th, 2019, which can be found in Exhibit A. Item B, approval of new funds. This is also in coordination with item C, grant approval. We received 3 new grants which we need local grant funds created. The first is the 3rd and 5th grade. That's a mini grant, which is from Guidance Counselor Denise Kondo. All these grants are from the Strongsville Education Foundation. The first one was awarded to Guidance Counselor Denise Kondo for 3rd and 5th grade additional counseling supports. The second one was an SEF grant from Makerspace for a garment printer, and the third was an SEF grant called the Rated Maker Miller Grant for professional development for the athletic department. And then the grant amounts, which could be found in Exhibit C, the DESA grant was $3,540. The printer grant was $5,792.95. The Rated Maker Miller grant was $500. Then in addition, we also received the tech club at the high school in the media center received the donate wall grant for the purchase of headsets. With that, in item D, the temporary appropriation measure will need to be updated for these grants, and then, which can be found in Exhibit B. And then the last item, which has a separate vote and discussion, E for the annual Ohio School Boards Association Capital Conference delegate appointments for November 10th, 11th, and 12th. I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Naso.
All right. I guess, do you want to discuss the delegate first? I would suggest anybody with a beard might be the first.
Mr. Miko?
I better go shave. No, I'm happy to go, and the only issue is I hope we have an alternate, because with work,
Okay.
I don't know what my travel requirements are going to be with
I'll be
work.
the alternate, unless somebody else would like to attend. I mean,
No, that's fine.
I can do it.
you can do it?
Yeah.
I'll make George the. Can I have a motion then, now that we have the 2 names?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. And a second?
Second.
Any other discussion about Richard and George being the, I think we're good. Take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes. And then that concludes my report.
thank you, nice job. Superintendent's report?
Thank you, Mr. Naso. And just to clarify, everybody can come. 3 of you can go down there too.
Whoa.
Yeah, so if you, I know you guys want to fight over it, but if both of you want to go down there, it would be awesome to have everybody that's able to go. It really is a beneficial conference.
You're just looking for somebody to talk to.
That's right, I need a friend.
It's free bean salad.
Just a couple timely information items, not on the agenda, but just as a reminder, I think we're all aware, but August 19th is our first day of school. That is just for our 1st graders and 9th graders. Our new kindergarten parents should have gotten a letter telling them about kindergarten orientation on that day. On the 20th, we welcome our kindergartners for their first day of school and students in grades 10 to 12. And then finally, on Wednesday, the 21st, our preschoolers come for their first day. So we're excited to welcome all of our students back and get the 1920 school year off to a great start. The only item I have under timely information for your consideration, and just a thank you to the board, we had our retreat recently. It was extremely beneficial, helping to provide direction to our work on our 2020 plan this year. But the mission core beliefs and 1920 district goals are there for your consideration. As the board knows, those stay consistent from the years past. It's the action steps underneath those that will be adjusted to meet our focus for this school year. So with that, Mr. Naso, it does need a vote, and I'll turn it over to you.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? I know we went through these in a lot of detail at the retreat. All right, George? Oh, go ahead.
The only comment that I'd like to make is that whoever or whomever comes onto this board at the beginning of the year, I think they should have an opportunity to review what we have and make any adjustments, or for that matter, just be able to read them and appreciate them, and, you know, and can just move forward with them.
Okay. We'll
Good
make that
idea.
all available.
Well, for all you candidates out there, they're right there in the agenda. You can look at them if you'd like.
Okay. Can I have a vote?
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Continuing on, Steve Breckner, Operations Manager, is going to share with us some items for business services for the month. Steve?
Good evening, everyone. There's a few items here. The first is the security contract addendum. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the security service contract addendum for services at the high school with Allied Universal. The rate structure will be effective beginning August 21st, 2019. All services will be paid out of the parking lot fee revenues in the high school 018 fund.
All right. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? Is this rate consistent with, what was the rate last year?
It was like 1580 for the straight time, and it was 23 something
Okay.
for the overtime. So it was a pretty typical.
Time and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No. George?
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The second item is the copy and printer maintenance agreement, which is out of the general fund. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to renew the agreement with ACE Business Solutions for the service and supply program for the district's copiers and printers. This agreement is to be effective for 1 year from September 4th, 2019 to September 3rd, 2020. The cost will be based on the monthly meter program. The third item is a vendor-managed supply program. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education enters into an agreement between Strongsville City Schools and ALCO for the vendor-managed supply program as stated in the exhibit for 1 fiscal year in the amount of $41,000. Funding to be from the general fund, supplies, materials for custodial.
All right. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Let's vote.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Naso? Or
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Oops, sorry.
Sorry.
Do you want
I jumped it.
I'll say yes, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
And Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
We went quick, but this is a good initiative, Steve. You did good to get this pricing, and I know it's going to benefit us financially. So
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you.
Steve, I do have one question. In regards to the copier and printer maintenance, last year we implemented the software to help control print costs and also be able to track departmentally what's printing. Do you have enough data to see whether it's working?
I don't have a full year's worth of data to present to you. That's my plan after a full year's been implemented. I can tell you we're trending savings.
Good.
Our click counts are down on a monthly basis.
Do you think we're going to save enough to pay for the software at the
I
very
believe so.
least? Okay, good.
The last item is a gift from Margaret Datis, donated $100 to the Strongsville High School Piano Fund.
Excellent.
George, how much do we have left for that piano fund? Do we have any idea on what the amount remaining is
I
for
can-
that fund?
I can get it to you in an update.
Okay,
I just don't know off the top of my head.
no problem.
So,
no
I can get
problem.
it to you.
If we can get that, I think we should maybe try to push for that and to finish it up this year.
Okay.
I'll pick up a chunk of it. I'll pick up a chunk.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, Director of Curriculum, Erin Green, with her updates for the month. Erin?
Thank you. Two items tonight for your consideration. First item is an out-of-state trip for the Strongsville High School boys and girls varsity cross-country teams. They are looking to go to Rochester, New York, to participate in the McQuaid Invitational and tour the American side of Niagara Falls, September 28th and 29th. Chartered motor coach and expenses will be paid by the participating students and through fundraising. And the second item tonight is a speech language pathology clinical practicum placement. Student or practicum placement for Sarrar Elementary School, assigned to Kate Martin from August 26th to December 15th. And she's a student at the University of Akron, the lady joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next is Andy Trio, Director of Student Services, with his report for this month. Andy?
Good evening, members of the board. I have 3 items for your consideration. The first is Education Alternatives Student Transportation Agreement. This is an agreement we enter into every year just to have available to us in case we need help transporting a student to educational alternatives. Quite honestly, haven't implemented it for at least a few years now, but it's there if we need it and the rate's competitive. That's in Exhibit F. Second is Applewood Centers for the Gerson School for placement of students with disabilities at a rate of $41,000 per student. We currently have 1 student there placed as of now. Number 3, Monarch School. In the agenda, you'll see for 2 students, I'm going to ask you that you, in Exhibit H, that you only look at pages 3 and 4. The first 2 pages, I'm going to pull out of there. Some things have changed with that student, so we're just going to focus on pages 3 and 4, and that's for $81,090 a year. Any questions?
So we have 2 recommendations in here in item
Right.
3, right? Either, they're non-specific, right? So we're
Yeah, these are students that are already placed there.
Yeah, so we would delete one of the.
delete one of these. So when we go to
recommendations.
modify this, then we could say the second one's been deleted.
Sure.
Is that correct? Or the first one doesn't matter to you?
Yeah, it's the same here, but the Exhibit H is pages 1 through 4. Pages 1 and 2 I'm taking out, that's for 1 student. I want you to approve
Okay, we'll take
pages
the first.
3 and 4.
Okay, we'll take the first one.
So we remove the first block.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
And we will remove pages 1 and 2 of Exhibit H.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And finally, with our human resource
And
report.
thank you for the advance notice of that today. We all
Yeah.
got notified that there'd be a modification so that we could get ready.
Sure, you're welcome. Jenny Pelko, our Assistant Superintendent, with our human resource report.
Good evening. I have the following items under Human Resources for your consideration this evening. Under E1, we have the resignation of an administrative staff member. Under E2, the appointment of an administrative staff member, appointment of certificated staff, appointments for certificated substitutes, appointments for non-certificated substitutes, an appointment for certificated supplemental contract paid upon completion, and appointments for non-certificated supplemental contracts. And before I go on to E3, I wanted to go to the addendum that we gave you, the green sheet. And I am excited to announce we do have a new high school assistant principal, Eric Castle, who has filled this position. Actually, we hired him today and have him on the agenda for your consideration. And he came directly, his daughter, who's I think outside running around, right? Lots of energy. Lucy had a swim meet this evening, so he raced back from Hudson to be here with us. So we appreciate you being here on such short notice. And Eric has been a teacher in our district, teaching social studies at the high school since 2015. He's also taught at Canton McKinley High School and Maple Heights as well, social studies. And it has been his desire to move into the administrative ranks with us, and we're just thrilled that we're able to have him join us. And so, Eric, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say a few words? Okay.
First off, good evening. I'd like to thank the Strongsville City School community for giving me the opportunity to serve as an assistant principal at Strongsville High School. It is an incredible honor to serve in a building that I've had the privilege to teach at for 4 years and seeing the amazing things going on. I look forward to strengthening my existing relationships while forging new ones with staff and students so I could better understand their concerns and serve them how they see fit. So I am very grateful for this position and extremely honored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations again. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
I know you're doing this problem.
Thanks, Lucy, for coming here.
Hi, Lucy.
Hey, Lucy.
There she is. Congratulations again, Eric. We're excited to have you on board. Following that on the addendum, I have the appointment of a certificated teacher. And then continuing under E3, with change in status for non-certificated staff, changes in status for non-certificated recall from reduction in force status. And I thought it was longer than that. I guess that concludes my report this evening.
And we have no items under technology, so that concludes the superintendent's report.
How are the Chromebooks being divvied out? Are they?
At the high school?
Yep.
Same as that they are. Dave, do you have an update on the distribution of the new Chromebooks? Thanks.
As of yesterday, we finished enrolling all the new Chromebooks for the freshmen that are coming in. They're going to be distributed through the first 2 days of school, I believe. Actually, it's Wednesday and Thursday. So not the first 2 days of school, but they're going to be enrolled during their lunch times. This is going to come during their study hall portion of their lunch.
Okay, thank you.
That's Monday when the freshmen come in, right?
Monday when the freshmen come in, but they're going to get them Wednesday and Thursday through a rotating basis, right, Dave? Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. That brings us to report on Polaris.
Thank you, Mr. Nay. So just as Strongsville is getting ready to go back to school, Polaris is getting ready to go back to school also. Their first day is August 26th, so Polaris students have a little bit more vacation time to enjoy the summer. Juniors are in the morning, seniors are in the afternoon. We had a board meeting earlier this week at Polaris, and we're able to tour the new construction where we're at. And like all good construction projects, it's coming to the last minute, and I look at it and I can't imagine how it's going to be ready and open in time, but I'm convinced, I've been convinced that it will be. So everything will be ready for when the students return, and then the construction will be finished. The primary construction will be all wrapped up by October, and they tell us, by December everything will be buttoned up and all done. But it's been very exciting. It's similar to when we built the middle school and remodeled the high school. It's all brand new, and it's very exciting to see, and it'll be a great thing for all the students. So I look forward to the new year for them.
Excellent, thank you. Legislative report?
Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, but no, thankfully the legislature is on vacation, and so I have very little to report. I will comment that Representative Cupp was at a meeting in Lima earlier this week, and he talked about how although a new funding formula didn't occur and wasn't pushed through with the budget, there's still a lot of momentum, and he's still committed to fixing or changing the way we fund schools in Ohio. And during that meeting, he indicated he's hoping that the legislature will adopt new rules next year to go into effect a year later. So we'll stay focused on that because it'll be important for Strongsville to make sure their voice is heard. And that concludes my report.
All right. On the legislation side, I came across something in my day job that was a little bit scary. It's called the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. And they have the ability to issue financing for projects. And the scary part about this organization, it's been around, the legislation's been around since the 70s, it came out of the EPA. But now they're interpreting it as such to allow financing of projects. So it could be like a mall, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be air quality related. But they're interpreting it to be almost anything. And in this case, it's a multi-use facility, $200 million project. But the scary part is without local approval or without coming to the school boards, they're able to issue, it's tax exempt for the life of the bonds. So there's this huge project going in Cleveland, and it's about an $80 million hit to the Cleveland School District over a 40-year period. And it's just, it's unheard of. And so there's certainly to be a lot of challenges. But I forwarded the information on to the city and to George to take a look at. I'll get it to you because I like to read that stuff. But it's really kind of scary. And they're testing it right now. And if it works, someone could build in here, they could buy the mall, and then it becomes ultimately tax-free. And then also we get no tax revenue from it at all. So we're keeping our eye on that and seeing what we can do. Hopefully it just gets bogged down in court. It never comes to fruition, but it's a little scary. Okay, board liaison reports, City Council, Jane?
Okay, yes, City Council is in recess for the month of August, but I'd like to welcome Council Representative Kelly Kosick is here this evening. Thanks for coming. So they will resume again in September, so no report for Council.
Excellent. Strongsville Education Foundation?
They did meet earlier this month and are getting geared up for the start of the new school year. They've got some plans. I don't know if they're officially announced yet, so I won't share them, but they got some plans for some new ideas, some new community events to get the foundation out there, interacting with the community and continuing to support the school district.
Excellent. All right. PTA Council?
Well, PTA is going to be starting up soon, so we're encourage everyone to join their PTAs. Grandparents are welcome to join as well, even if you don't have children in the district, you're welcome to be a member of the PTA. And I wanted to announce that Sarar PTA has already started with a fundraiser planned for September 21st. It's a collection of any unwanted clothing, shoes, toys. They'll take it from 9 to 11 a.m. on September 21st to raise money for their PTA. So
on that day, they're taking contributions, or they're going to have the
yes,
sales?
yeah,
So
no,
contribution?
you can
Okay.
just donate anything you don't want in your house. So after you do all your back-to-school shopping, take all your clothes that the children don't fit into anymore and donate them to the Sorors.
That's excellent. Cool. Student achievement?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure there'll be a lot of student achievement coming up starting next week.
Excellent. Okay, board committee reports. Finance Committee, there was not a committee meeting. The next meeting will be October 15th at 6:30. Policy Committee?
There wasn't a meeting, and the next meeting is to be announced.
All right. Facilities Committee?
The next meeting is the 26th of September, and it'll be at 6:30 here in the admin building.
Business Advisory Council Committee, the next meeting date has not been determined. So we'll figure that out. That brings us to consent calendar. All actions of the Board of Education are adopted in a single vote. All the items marked with an asterisk. We know item 10D3, the first paragraph is stricken, and page 1 and 2 of Exhibit H is removed as well. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, George. Have a second?
Second.
I wasn't gonna ruin the change second street.
Any discussion on any items with an asterisk? Take a vote.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
And Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, that brings us to Board of Education Other. Board of Education Other, be it resolved, at our retreat, we discussed some board guidelines that were overarching kind of rules and just kind of guidelines for helping us act as a more effective board. We decided at that meeting that we would vote, so can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Can I have a second?
Second.
Oh, go
Thank you,
ahead.
Jane.
Jane, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
It's okay. Who's the second?
Jane.
Jane.
Okay.
All right, the streak continues.
Perfect record.
Yes. Any discussion?
Yes, I
Okay.
have an issue. I can't support the guidelines as presented if they include a statement that says, requests requiring significant time, effort, or cost should be directed through the board president. This imposes a guideline that flies in the face against what a board member's duties are according to the Ohio School Board Association's Code of Ethics and Strongsville City Schools Policy 0123-D, which states, and I quote, individual board members have no authority to speak or act for the board. If you vote for the guidelines without removing this statement, you're giving the board president authority to speak for you, thereby determining what they feel is important, whether you agree with their decision or not. Rather, this statement should be stricken, and the line as originally proposed by the superintendent, which stated, and I quote, communicate requests for information or staff requests through the superintendent and/or treasurer, end quote. The original guideline should stand alone as proposed. Nowhere does the Ohio School Board Code of Ethics or Strongsville School Policy state the board president holds more power over another board member. Rather, each board member is elected and is equal in standing. All of us are duly elected with one vote.
Okay.
According to the Strongsville City Schools Policy 0173-A, the president of the Board of Education has the following responsibilities: presides at public meetings, may call special meetings, appoints all committees, signs, notes, documents for the district where the president is called, assists in preparation of board agenda. It does not state the board president is the liaison for the rest of the board. Including the inserted line exceeds the parameters of the role of the board president and is tantamount to abuse of power where none should be bestowed.
Okay. I think you're misinterpreting what the rule says. I think you're misinterpreting what the guideline says, because what the guideline says is that the requests requiring significant time or effort or cost should be directed through the board president. All that means is that the board president won't make the determination. I do what I normally do, is just poll the board. Is this something you're interested in? And what it's to prevent is one board member making a large request of the staff where they have to put in a ton of effort and time, taking away their bandwidth, taking them away from what they normally do to focus on a single project that the majority or the will of the board doesn't follow. So when those requests come through me, when Cameron says, hey, there's this big request, I poll the board. I call individual members, are you interested in this? If they say no, then I say, are you interested in pursuing just to have the research done? Like, I'm not interested in this at all. So then I call another board member, then I call another board member, and they all say, if they say that they're not interested, then we don't proceed. In that way, what that does is it saves time and effort from the staff from running to ground some large project that's not gonna occur. So that's the purpose of the thing. It's not that the president makes the decision, no, we're not gonna do this. It's just a polling of the will of the board, so that, because an individual board member cannot direct the efforts of the school district. It's the will of the board. So the board president is merely asking, is it the will of the board that we proceed on this? And so that's the only thing. He's not making the decision, not usurping anyone's authority, not making any judgment calls, just checking to see if it's the will of the board. What we don't want is individual board members in their conversations or calls with the superintendent to say, hey, this is something I want you to check out. And then it turns out that, he turns his staff loose, and pretty soon we've got 100 hours into something that no one's interested in, that has no chance of passing the board. So that's all it is. It's not the president of the board making any specific determination. The president of the board is simply checking the will of the board to see if we should proceed. So that's all that means. I understand if it was to say that the board president makes the decision. The board president doesn't make the decision. Cameron, we've had these conversations time and time again. We hear something and someone makes a request, and then we talk, and we're like, you know what? I'll call the individual board members. No, we're not interested in that. No, we're not interested in that. No, we're not interested in that. Then I'll say, Cameron, there's no reason to run that down to the ground. There's no reason to expend a bunch of effort because we've got a limited staff. So that's the only purpose of this guideline, and it doesn't come into play very often, but it's certainly not that the board president makes the determination. That's not it at all. All he does is take a tally. Are you interested? Yes, 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 or no, and then we move forward.
And exactly how many times have you phoned me to ask for input on anything over the last 5 years, Mr. Naso?
A number of times that you haven't answered your phone.
I have my call logs to prove. I don't believe you've ever called me.
Generally, I start with George, I go to Duke, and by me, if it's 3, if it's 2, the vote's over. So, that's the way it'll work. You're difficult to get a hold of during the day. It's okay, Jane. I get your point, we get it. I'm not for making any changes.
I concur.
I'm the same.
Okay, Richard?
Can I just ask the timeline? So Jane had a concern about this, brought it to Cameron's attention. Cameron discussed it with Carl, and then it came back and said, we're not going to make any changes.
I just said I'm not gonna make any, I didn't know what her, this is the first I've heard her full explanation.
Okay, but to be clear, Jane, because we discussed this at the
Meeting.
At the retreat, and we talked about making changes to the guidelines, and if there were any concerns, bring them to Cameron. And then the timeline was you spoke with Carl, and then it came back to Jane, we're not making any changes.
That's correct.
That's correct. And at the board, I believe at the retreat, you said you would vote for it. So that's why we've got 4 votes. Jane's, going off this board at the end of the year, and you said at the retreat you would vote for it. So that was 4 votes on what we had. And that's exactly what you said, correct?
I completely agree. I'm
Okay.
just, what has me concerned is the point of this is to have collaboration and to have agreement as a board. And when there's disagreement over these issues, I think it's incumbent on the board to say, how do we come to agreement for all the board members? Similar to our mission statement that we agreed on earlier today. There is no legal backing to these.
No, these are guidelines. These are guidelines. That's what we talked
discussed
about.
It's ways we should conduct ourselves to be better, to be a better board.
Right.
And I'm disappointed that this is how, if any individual board member has reservations about it, we should be able to work together to come to a unanimous decision.
Yeah, and I think the point is that Jane's point that she made is not how it works. It's not the board president, whoever sits in the seat next, come January, whoever sits in the seat, it's not them making a decision. They're simply polling the board to see where the board stands. And the whole thing is to protect the staff from running things to ground, running things down that don't necessarily, aren't the interest of the will of the board. We don't want individual board members directing the staff to move in one direction or another. It has to be the will of the board. So this step is about checking, and there's time, there's effort, there's costs related to some of these things. Sometimes you have to get lawyers involved, sometimes you have to do other things. So if it's not the will of the board to move forward, then we don't move forward, and we just make a call, and we see who's there. So, I mean, that's just how this works. I mean, it's not any usurping of power. It's nothing. It's just a mere tally. And we do it sometimes we do it sometimes right at the meetings when it comes up. Is this the way we want to go? Yes. It only comes into effect, the only time that it really gets used is when an individual board member makes a call to either to George or to Cameron or or really improperly to another staff member. And then Cameron has to say, well, you know, that's a lot of work. And then he'll talk to me and we'll say, it's a lot of work. It's not something we're interested in.
And again, Carl, I understand your practical understanding of it, and I understand Jane's reservations.
Okay. Would anyone like, I mean,
All I remember from our training, my training, is that the board president is the spokesman for the board. That's outlined in the rules too. I can't cite them like I had time to look them up like Jane did. But I understand the point, and we can't have all the board members running off and tasking the staff for different things without coordination. So I see.
how about I'll suggest this one change, okay, to maybe make this better. Cost, it should be directed through the board of the president to poll for the will of the board. Is that acceptable?
Is that allowed under the sunshine laws? I don't think you're allowed to even do that.
That might be a little difficult.
What's that?
The sunshine laws might be an issue.
I think the idea.
Okay, then let's just vote.
If I can just add a thought, you know, when we take a look at the guidelines,
I'm not asking for a vote. I'm asking, are you interested in this? It's not, will you vote yes, will you vote no? That's not the question. I'm polling the board for interest, and that's exactly what occurs. There's nothing, sunshine laws are not a problem with this. That's not an issue.
What I was stating is that, you know, when you take a look at these guidelines and we take a look at, we know we're going to have changes in the board, at least one member coming up in a few months, and kind of memorializing what does it mean to be a part of this 7-person leadership team in the district.
Cameron wrote these.
And put some guidelines together. Some of these are just, you know, great practices for highly effective boards, and some of them address some areas that we need to focus on as a leadership team. So I guess, you know, Jane, going back to your suggestion that we go back to the original verbiage, I think the one part that the board has to have coherence on to help, and I'll speak for me, is that there is a reality that requests have been made to the superintendent or treasurer that do require significant time, effort, or cost. And so as we take a look at our roles, the only way we can get the will of the board is to have somebody coordinate that effort, you know, I would suggest in a public discussion, to get that piece of it. So if we're not saying, you know, if we don't like the verbiage of what's stated there, I think, you know, a discussion to problem solve is, and I think it's a real reality that there are going to be requests from board members that hit the heart of what's there. So what are the procedures that George and I follow? This is a suggestion to follow where, as you read in the board responsibilities, because the board president, you know, helps to create the agenda and do things of that nature, that could be a direction that a discussion item is put on an agenda, or we get further clarity. So I do see that there's a need for some clarity as to how these procedures will work. And, you know, maybe there's some discussion on a process to have that happen. But there needs to, George, I don't know, I'm not putting you on a spot, I don't know if you have an opinion, but I'll speak for myself. There needs to be an avenue and direction to us so we can work well together for when we get these requests, what's the pathway we go? Because the pathway of what we've done is we've worked on them.
And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for one board member to direct this team to work on things that that the rest of the board's not interested in doing. So I mean, it's not.
So speaking practically, and this is something similar to our policy committee. I look at this Board of Education guidelines as policy, and then we have administrative guidelines which can change and serve the purposes they need to be. So I think it would be reasonable to strike the entire line, leaving communicate requests for information or staff requests through the superintendent or treasurer, strike the entire line, and our guideline would be if George or Cameron receive a request that takes an inordinate amount of resource or time, at that point, you bring it back to a board meeting. And I think your relationship with the board is sufficient that you can say, hey, I appreciate the request, let's discuss it at a board meeting. Because it's going to take time. It's going to take resource, et cetera. And then the entire board at a work session or whenever can get their input, and you, the treasurer, you, the superintendent, can determine in a public meeting in front of the taxpayer what the will of the board is.
So here's my comment. Why wouldn't we take the elected position of the president of the school board, and why wouldn't we, as board members, have that individual poll the individuals within this board? We're not breaking sunshine laws. When you have an individual call an individual for each individual member.
Because that
of 5
doesn't
members.
ever happen, George. Carl hasn't called me in 5
Jane,
years.
hang on a
So
second. I'm not
practically
finished.
speaking-
I'm not
true.
finished.
That's not true, Jane.
I'm not
That's a lie.
finished.
That's very true.
It isn't true, Jane. I've called
But,
you.
no, hang on a second. Stop. Why wouldn't we have the elected president poll the individual board members to see if it's a rational idea, if it's a worthwhile idea, if it's something that we want to do or not do? That's my question.
May I?
Sure.
The one consideration, and there is case law in Ohio, is that doing phone calls in a round-robin fashion like that
A vote.
can be considered having a meeting about the public's business. And, you know, I can see people arguing both sides of the coin, but there have been other school boards who have done the phone call thing about a single topic in a round-robin fashion, and the Supreme Court has found that you were breaking open meeting rules. If we're going to do that as a telephone call, if we do it in public during a meeting, it accomplishes the same goal, but we don't run the risk of someone saying, you're breaking sunshine laws. And we do accomplish the same thing, which is giving the superintendent and the treasurer direction on the will of the board.
Excellent.
And
So
it
is
may be
this
more
done,
collegial.
is this done in an executive session? Is this done in an open meeting?
It's done in an open meeting.
I think that would significantly slow down. Sometimes I'm looking at this as requests for information more than anything, and just finding out if board members are interested in getting more information on a particular topic should not be considered a meeting per se. I don't see how it could viably, I mean, I'm a sunshine law expert. George might be better at this than I am, but I don't see where,
I'm very careful about it when I make the calls. I'm not asking them how they vote. I ask, are you interested in pursuing this? And that is all it is. It's not, are you interested in doing this? It's not, how are you gonna vote? It's not that. So I'm done with the discussion.
It's
I don't know,
just
anybody else has
information.
any other comments? George, let's vote.
Colonel Evans?
yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
No.
Mr. Miko?
No.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
motion passes. Item 17, regular Board of Education meetings, work session will be on September 5th at 7 o'clock, right here. We have no need for executive session. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. George, take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
yes.
Meeting adjourned at 7:51.